What's up, everybody? How you doing? Mike, Virginia here with the Palazzo Podcast, coming at you live from my house in Virginia. So thanks for everyone joining. Appreciate you copping on, taking your questions. So at any point given time during the podcast, if you have your questions, please feel free to drop them in the live chat. If I sound funny and I feel like I'm talking at the side of my mouth, it's because I am. I'm dealing with a pretty nasty canker sore on the inside of my cheek, and it hurts like hell. So for those of you guys who have had them, know what I'm talking about. But yeah, so week 21, we are live and kicking, getting closer and closer to the fantasy baseball playoffs. Hopefully, you guys are doing well in your leagues. I was in my home league that I'm in right now. I'm actually playing one of my rivals, and I started off the week really, really hot, Monday through Thursday. Yesterday and today, my team is playing like absolute ass. I'm still up by quite a bit, but I wish I had a chance to jump into second place with this week. So a little bummed out, but hopefully my team can pull it together later in the second half of games later today. But without further ado, let's dive into some week 21 action. So for those of you guys who don't know, I have a waiver wire article live on Substack. I tweeted it out this morning. You can go to my Twitter page and subscribe. If you have questions or concerns on that, hit me up on Twitter. Happy to answer. MKB Fantasy. Hang on, right here. MKB Fantasy on Twitter. So if you have questions outside of today's podcast, feel free to mention me on Twitter. I'm happy to help out. Also, if you're in the Palazzo Podcast Discord, you will know that I'm in there as well. I have my own channel. You guys can ask me questions in there as well. It's the Discord. How to subscribe to the Discord is actually on that Substack. So make sure you guys check that out. And then if you haven't done so already, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Our quest to 1,000 followers by year's end is ongoing. So I'm hoping that, by the end of December, we can get to 1,000 followers. I know we're going to be doing some fantasy football and some college football betting content too. So hopefully we get a whole new wave of you guys in there. And kind of hanging out and engaging with us. So Jamie says, I'm not doing well. I had a hot week and falling off. Dude, me too, Jamie. It's been absolutely awful, man. I'm hoping that, like I said, the second half of games, I got Mount Castle and Henderson in this league. I'm trying to think who else I have. I had Silseth today, so I was happy that he pitched relatively well against a pretty tough Houston team. Didn't give up any runs, so that's good. But yeah, I just Friday and Saturday sucked for me, and today's not looking good either. So I'm still up quite a bit because I just was on a torrid week, Monday through Thursday. So I'm hoping to hold my head above water here to finish up the week, but man, it's been tough. So anyways, thank you guys. And Jamie, thank you for being here, man. Appreciate it. I'm looking forward to viewing some of your fantasy football content. All right. So without further ado, let's talk about some top 5 waiver ads this week. If you haven't been viewing today's games, this is my number one guy on my article this week. It's Zach Geloff, the second baseman of the Oakland Athletics. We talked about him on Friday's show. He has another 2 home runs today versus the Nationals. The guy is absolutely on fire. I tweeted it out yesterday as well, and I said it in the live stream on Friday in our podcast. Zach Geloff is the AL version of Matt McClain. So if he's not owned in your league, I would rush into the waiver wire to go get him. He's been on a torrid pace since he's been called up. So the average is something left to be desired, but still, with being a rookie and playing for Oakland, I think that number continues to climb. I think there are going to be some ebbs and flows, though. I don't think he can maintain this pace the rest of the season. While that would be really, really cool, I don't think that happens. He's not immune to it. Big Gentle Ben and I, Benjamin Chase, talked about it on Friday's show as well in the half-hour power hour. So no rookie is immune to this type of ups and downs. So I don't think Geloff is going to be somebody who's going to be keeping up this pace. But I do hope, and right now you got to ride the wave. So he's one of Oakland's best prospects since being called up. He's hitting 253, 16 runs scored, 6 home runs, 11 RBIs, and 6 stolen bases. Go ahead and add on another, give me 2 home runs to that. total because he's got 2 home runs against the Nationals today. So the guy's on fire. I love him as a 5x5 category guy. And it's somebody who can help your teams out come the fantasy playoffs and rest of the season. So if you need second base help, go run, don't walk, run to the waiver wire to go get Zach Geloff. Next week, he gets 3 games versus the Cardinals at St. Louis, and then 3 games at home versus Baltimore. So I wouldn't say they're necessarily easy matchups, but they're not tough matchups either. Kind of middle of the road. St. Louis doesn't really scare me that much. Baltimore's got a couple good starters in there. Being a little bit biased, but again, I think Geloff can produce. So he's only 24% rostered in Yahoo League. So all my Yahoo guys, go out and get Zach Geloff. I hope you get him. I have a claim in for him because he was just dropped in one of my leagues. I have a claim in for him. I'm hoping I get him. I have the number 2 waiver wire position, so I'm hoping that the number 1 guy doesn't go get him. So Zach Geloff is my first choice there. Secondly, before I dive into the second one, I know we have a couple more viewers jumping in. If you have questions or concerns, or you have, want to talk about your team, drop them in the live chat. Happy to beam them up on screen here. Happy to answer your questions. I want to help you guys out. So if there's somebody you're kind of on the fence with, hey, should I drop him and add this guy? Drop him in the live chat. This is the most critical point of the fantasy baseball season, in my opinion. Getting into the middle stages of August as we approach September, it is vital that some of these guys that we're holding on to, it's okay to cut ties with. So it's not something where I feel like you have to hang on to him because you drafted him in the 5th round or the 6th round or whatever it may be. I think you can get away with dropping these guys if they haven't been producing and picking up a guy that's hot and can help your team. There's no reason to keep rolling out a guy who's continuing to go 0 for 0 for 0 for, or a pitcher that's in ERAs in the 5s or 6, right? So we got a message for our question from Tony. Geloff or Gurriel Jr. points league. It's close, Tony. It really depends on team context. I love Gurriel Jr., even though he's not hitting as well as he once was. I think he's a hold at this point, but I think if you can find, is there anybody else in your team that you can drop? If you need second base help and you're deep in the outfield, I have no problem making this swap. I would just prefer to hang on to Gurriel. If he's the worst player on your team, you should be riding pretty high in the standings there. So let me know though. Let me know who else is on your team and see if we can find another person to drop. But right now I'd say it's close. I'd still probably rather have Gurriel just in terms of team context. But Geloff's up there. So. All right, so diving into number 2 is Ke'Bryan Hayes. Britton Allen, follow him on Twitter at Britton Allen. Talked about him on Friday's show, and he was actually one of my guys that we were going to add on there as well. Is Ke'Bryan Hayes, Pittsburgh Pirates third baseman. He was one of my favorite prospects coming up through that system. Even with the plethora of injuries he's had really throughout his entire career, I feel like his potential has never really shown through. But he's been on fire recently these past 3 games. So, and I know they were rained out yesterday, but in the last 4 games, he's 8 for 17 with 4 runs, 3 home runs, and 10 RBIs. So I love Ke'Bryan Hayes. I think he's worth a flyer in some of your deeper formats. Obviously, the Pirates aren't great, but he's going to be hitting anywhere between 1, 2, and 3 in that lineup, and he should see consistent playing time if he can stay healthy. So I love Ke'Bryan Hayes. I think he's an ad this week in 12-team leagues or deeper. He's only 44% rostered in Yahoo leagues, and I think you can get him without no problem. Next week, he gets 3 games at the Mets. And then he gets 3 games at Minnesota. So the Mets don't scare me, especially without Verlander and Scherzer there. I think you can go out and get him and ride the wave if you need a hot bat. If you have one of those that roster flexibility that you can stream a hitter, Ke'Bryan Hayes fits that mold. So I actually don't know how well he's doing right now. I know they got a doubleheader. Give me 2, Pittsburgh and Cincinnati. So if somebody wants to let me know how he's doing in today's game, I'd be interested to know. Tony, Brandon Lowe. Or Lau is actually how you pronounce his last name, by the way. Josh Lowe and Brandon Lau, even though they're spelled the same. Brandon Lau is how you pronounce that guy's last name. I am making the swap of Zach Geloff for Brandon Lau. No question about it. I do like Brandon Lau, but his average is really shitty. He sits against some lefties too. But again, I just prefer the upside of Geloff, and I prefer the 5 category contribution that you're going to get from him across the board. So give me the AL version of Matty McLean over Brandon Lau, 100%. Britton Allen, what's up, buddy? Hey, Mike, what in the world is going on with Wander Franco? I don't know. The whole rate, I mean, here's the thing. And I was just actually talking about this with somebody, one of my relatives who lives in Florida. We were talking about the Rays earlier in the day. Losing your entire starting rotation essentially has really killed, I think, Tampa Bay's motivation, really, or probably the feeling in the clubhouse is kind of defeated, if you will. Wander Franco, for me, and I'm just bringing him up here really quick, is that type of player where he's going to go through ups and downs. But he got a breather today. He's actually been hitting pretty well over the past 2 weeks, hitting 388, 5 home runs, and 10 RBIs. I actually don't own any shares of Wander Franco, Britton. So if you were asking me what in the world is going on with him, like how hot he is, dude's playing well. So it's worth noting too that the Rays are losing today. They were losing 9-2. They won last night and the night before, trying to keep pace with the Orioles in that division. But Wander Franco, we're going to be talking about him probably as a top 3 shortstop drafted last year, just because of the power and the stolen bases that you can get from him. So, but in reality, if you watch the Rays team in general, I don't think hitting is going to be the problem for them. I think their starting rotation is going to be the problem for them moving forward. But I tell you what, if anyone's going to beat the odds and say, hey, we're just going to throw these guys that nobody's heard of and we're just going to play baseball, it would be surprising to see them go deep in the playoffs. Britton says, I keep seeing on Twitter that he's in trouble or something. He did sit today. I'm not exactly sure why. The guy's been killing it. I know they sat him earlier in the year because of some clubhouse issues, if you will. I'm not really sure what that means, so maybe it's related. I haven't heard much, Britton, but something definitely to look into. But yeah, love Wander Franco rest of the season. Obviously, if he's not an asshole the rest of the season to his teammates or whatnot. But Charles, what's up, man? Asks, what's up with Yuri? Expected a better performance today. Dodgers next. Yeah, Charles, and I'm happy to wear this one as well. I was really excited for Yuri to get his recall back up. He's struggling a little bit, and that may be due to the fact that he's never thrown this many innings in his career, so he may be losing a little gas. The Yankees are not a slouch team, especially with Aaron Judge back. So, but I expected a better performance today as well. I do still think he's a hold, and at least for 1 or 2 more starts, and hoping that he's just knocking off some rust to make, being back in the majors. His upside is clearly there, but at the same time, too, the results haven't shown. So if you can afford to keep him on your team for another 1 or 2 more starts just to see if he gets his head out of his butt, I think he's a hold for right now. But if you have other options available on the waiver wire and in shallower formats, I wouldn't be opposed to dropping him for somebody like a Gavin Williams, which we'll talk about in a second. So great question. But at the same time, too, I'm holding Yuri everywhere if I could, especially obviously in dynasty formats. But in redraft, I'd probably hold on for 1 or 2 more starts. I know the Dodgers is not a very welcoming start, but who knows? Maybe he pitches well there. But let's see how he does there and maybe the next start before we drop him. Jamie asks, I know most of play in 10 to 12 leagues. I think you mean 10 to 12 team or okay, I got you. I know most play in 10 to 12 leagues, but I'm in that 20-man league as well. So deeper league get to be very limited, which is why I mentioned Lawrence. The kid from Oakland, I think you were mentioning, was that in last Sunday's show? Lawrence Butler, or on Friday, maybe, I can't remember. But yeah, if you're playing a really, really deep league, Lawrence Butler's a good ad. We haven't really seen much of him, though. Yuri, Britton is pissed. I guarantee you he's probably not pissed. I know Govier and Britton are probably like wringing their hands together like, ooh, I can't wait to bring this up on Friday's show and bust Mike's chops. I love Yuri Perez. That's been no doubt about it. If you guys have been following me on Twitter, but the results have not been there yet. So I'm about to be putting my foot in my mouth here soon. I'm getting it all greased up, getting ready to go. But I am going to give him 1 or 2 more starts before I start calling it quits with him. I really just think it has to do with the fact that he just hasn't done this many innings. And I think at some point the Marlins are going to play it safe with him and shut him down, especially if he's not playing very well, and or if they're out of the wild card spot. But the Marlins are right there in the thick of things, so they need him actually to produce. But their problem is not really starting pitching, or I guess it kind of is over the past couple of weeks. Although Sandy Alcantara, shout out Govier, I know you have him in one of your leagues, pitched a complete game shutout yesterday, which was cool. I think it was a shutout, if I'm not mistaken. But he's back, ladies and gentlemen. Sandy Alcantara is back. So if you held on, hot damn, good for you. He's getting hot at the right moment, the most important part of the season. So all the shit that happened before in the season, don't care about. If you are in the thick of things and in a playoff, if you're in a playoff push, Sandy Alcantara, he's looking good. So I love the fact that they let him go so deep in games, by the way. They could have easily handed that ball over to David Robertson. I think he was at like 123 pitches. But the dude just shoved it up their butts and finished out the game. So if you have Sandy Alcantara, I personally don't have any shares. I think he was a kind of a fade for me just because of, he won the Cy Young, maybe a letdown year. I liked him. I didn't like him at his draft price. I don't own any shares of Sandy Alcantara, but I'm happy for the folks that do, including my boy, Michael Govier. Michael Govier says, no, I was pro Yuri for a long time. I just had to move on. Can't move on. Ride with me. That's why he's sucking, Michael. It's because you're not with me on him, man. Pick him back up so we can play well. I have him in 9 leagues. Are we talking about Alcantara or are we talking about Yuri? I know you have Alcantara in one of your leagues. I can't remember. Jamie says, yes, it was Friday. We were talking about Lawrence Butler. Okay, cool. Yeah. He's, like I said, in 20-team leagues, he's worth an ad. All right, diving into next. So we talked about the first two. If you're new and just came into the show, we talked about my first waiver wire ad, which was Zach Geloff. Second was Cabrian Hayes. The third I want to talk about, and get ready. Let me have your ears for a second, okay? Gavin Williams, all right, is on an absolute tear for the Cleveland Guardians, all right? Pitched again yesterday. He's back-to-back games. First game was 12 Ks against Toronto, and then 10 Ks versus Tampa Bay. He generated 19 whiffs. That was tied with Sandy Alcantara for the most on the day, okay? And he was actually throwing harder. His four-seam fastball was up 1.6 miles per hour. So starting to find his groove and his footing a little bit. It's the Guardians can't hit or shit, but they can sure as hell pitch. Tanner Bybee is throwing a gem today right now after Gavin Williams threw a gem yesterday. So plus they got Logan Allen, who's a tantalizing prospect too. So I like him a lot. Gavin Williams was compared to Garrett Cole coming into the season, and we're finally starting to see that. I think it's probably because of his build. But the guy has plus stuff across the board. For the month of August, he owns a 1.59 ERA with a 28-5 K to walk ratio. I'm going to say that again, 28 Ks to 5 walks. Over his past 2 games, he's got 22 Ks to 1 walk. Okay. He's my number one waiver wire ad, pitcher hitter. I don't care if he's available in your league, and he's only 44% owned in Yahoo leagues. He should be owned. Okay, rush to the waiver wire to go get him. Yes, I rank him above Zach Geloff. If this is a guy that is to not be on the waiver wire right now with how hot he is and his prospect pedigree. We're finally starting to see him kind of reach that potential, and I think he's only going to continue to get better after these last 2 starts against Toronto and Tampa Bay that are not slouches of offenses here. I know Toronto's missing Bo Bichette, but still. He's going to be riding into this next start riding high, and I love him next week. I don't recall who they have next week in terms of his next start, but Gavin Williams is a must-own player for me. I know a lot of people were sour on him because they were watching his innings and his pitches that he was throwing, and the results that weren't necessarily there. But like we talked about on Friday in the show, if you haven't checked that out, make sure you go to our YouTube channel and check out the Prospect Half Hour Power Hour show. Ben and I talked about it. No rookie is immune to the ups and downs of their first, second seasons. And Gavin Williams did not come out of the gate real hot, but he's sure as hell hot now, and he is a must roster player. Charles says his next start comes against Detroit. So the arrow's continuing to point up. Stop watching this show. Actually, don't stop. Put it in the background. If your waiver wire comes in tomorrow, put in a claim form. If you can add him right now for free, go do it. Go do it now. Gavin Williams is that kind of player. So I'm really hyped for him. I was lucky to hold on to him in my home league. We have a pretty deep league in there in terms of roster position. So I held on to Gavin Williams. I've just been sitting him. I did start him yesterday, which I was happy about, and the last start. So I'm riding high. I love Gavin Williams. Go Adam. All right. Charles asks, do you think Silseth will stick around in the rotation with Canning back? Maybe put Tyler Anderson in the pen. Silseth, God, that's a tongue twister, is possibly my Uri replacement later on. That's a good question, Charles. I have Chase Silseth in my home league. I picked him up last week as a streamer, and he obviously had that great start. Had that 12 strikeout performance. I held on to him, hoping that maybe he could catch lightning in a bottle again against Houston. And today he looked pretty good. I will say that, in terms of whether he sticks around in the rotation, it's worth noting in today's start that his, I want to say his third time through the order, he was losing a lot of velo on his fastball. Actually, really on all of his fastballs, about 3 or 4 miles per hour. They mentioned that in the telecast. I do think that they're going to be careful with him, but it's clear that he's their best starting pitcher right now, not named Shohei Ohtani. I don't see how you can remove him from this rotation right now with how well he's been pitching. I would be absolutely shocked if they sent him back to the bullpen or if they sent him back down to get Griffin Canning back in there. It's hard to say, really. I don't know what the Angels are going to do in terms of who comes out of that rotation. I think the clear-cut choices are probably going to be Tyler Anderson and somebody else that's losing me right now. That I was like, oh yeah, that's got to be another guy. Maybe Patrick Sandoval. I think they leave him in there though. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't know. I don't think anybody does, unless, including the Angels. Phil Nevin doesn't know either on what they're going to do. But he's clearly given them the best spot to win the past couple of starts. You can't remove him right now. He's been that good. So if you have Chase Silseth on your team right now, I'm holding until we find out more news. I don't believe Griffin Canning has been activated yet. So maybe they play it safe with him and say, hey, you know what? We got Chase Silseth rolling right now. We'll give you a couple extra weeks on the IL. And then, hopefully things can play themselves out from there. But if you own him, you're holding on to him. If you don't own him, I don't know if I'm dropping Uri for him right now. But if you have somebody else that you can drop, I would be making that move. Chad says, speaking of rookies, get your hands on Zach Geloff while you still can. My hype train on him continues to shine. Yeah, Chad, I talked about him earlier on in the show. He was the first guy I talked about in my waiver wire article. Zach Geloff, he had another 2 home runs today. Give me 2. So if you need second base help, or really if you just, he needs to be owned, Zach Geloff, in my opinion. So make sure you go get Zach Geloff if you have the room for him. Charles says Canning was activated today. Okay, so let's see how it goes after today's game. Maybe even tomorrow or Tuesday we find out. Maybe the Angels make the announcement of who's going to be removed from the rotation. I guarantee you, and I'd actually bet my house with my mother in it, that they are going to ask Phil Nevin after today's game, what are you doing with Chase Silseth in the post-game interview? So give that a couple more hours. Hopefully we should have some news regarding that. But for right now, if you own Chase Silseth, you're holding on to him. If you don't, let's see how the rest of tomorrow shakes out in terms of their rotation plans. So Charles says, thanks. No problem, buddy. Absolutely. Always happy to help. If you have questions throughout the live stream, please feel free to put them in the live chat. I'm happy to help out. Again, it could be about your current team. It could be about Dynasty. It could be an ad drop. It could be a 2-start pitcher stream next week, whatever it may be. I'm here to help you. Okay. For those of you guys who missed the opening part of the show, I'm dealing with a really tough canker sore on the inside of my mouth right now. So if it feels like this whole side of my face is not moving, it's because it hurts to talk. It's huge. It's killing me right now. All right. So to recap, we've talked about Zach Geloff, Brian Hayes, and we talked about Gavin Williams so far. Gavin Williams is only 44% rostered in Yahoo leagues. Go get him. I love him rest of the season. Absolutely love him. My number 4 guy to add, MJ Melendez of the Kansas City Royals. If you've been watching the past couple of days or the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about a lot of Royals players recently. And MJ Melendez is the next guy that I'm adding on this list. I'm going to try like hell to find a way to get him in one of my home leagues. He is 63% rostered but somebody lost patience with him, and I don't blame him, but it's kind of crazy that he hasn't been picked up yet. He got dropped on Monday or Tuesday in my league. I own Chase Murphy. I own Sean Murphy as my catcher in my home league. And he sits every other day. So it sucks because he's such a great hitter. And I feel like they were talking about, somebody tweeted it out I think yesterday or the day before. They play their top 4 guys of Albies, Acuna, Riley, and Olsen. Those guys have played almost every single game this year, but yet they like the GM came out and said, I think that makes them stronger hitters. I think that makes them better as the season goes on. But yet he continues to sit Sean Murphy, which he's been awesome this year. I'm not saying, and I think they actually have a strong platoon between Travis d'Arnaud and Sean Murphy, because d'Arnaud's been playing pretty well when he plays as well. So maybe that's time to give Murphy a time to rest. They're obviously, playing for the postseason. They're going to be in there. So maybe they're just saying, hey, we got a guy that can easily fill your shoes while you're out, get some rest. But I feel like he sits every other day. So MJ Melendez is a great guy because he qualifies at catcher and in the outfield, 2 scarce positions. So if you need one of those guys or one of those positions, go get MJ Melendez. Over the last 2 weeks, I'm a numbers guy, folks, so hear me out here. Over the last 2 weeks, he's hitting .289 with 9 runs, 4 home runs, 7 RBIs, and 1 stolen base. Over the last month, he's hitting .283 with 14 runs scored, 6 home runs, 11 RBIs, and 2 stolen bases. So across the board production there for MJ Melendez. Again, he was a highly touted prospect in the Royal system, and I know he wasn't off to the greatest of starts in the beginning of the season. I think a lot of people lost patience and dropped him. He does get a pretty rough matchup next week. He's got 4 at Seattle, and Seattle owns the best ERA, gives it the second least hits and the least amount of runs in all of baseball. So he gets 4 games at Seattle. It's not lining up to be a solid start to the week, but then he gets 3 games at the Cubs. So he does have potential there. Who knows? Maybe he continues the hot streak. But I like him a lot. If you need catcher help, or if you need somebody in the outfield, MJ Melendez is a guy that obviously help you out in 2 scarce positions. That's why I like him so much, is because of the roster flexibility. So Chad says, petition to shoot anyone on site if they mention Alex Cobb ever again. Yeah, I was rolling him out. I was actually in one of my leagues, I was actually streaming him. It's a shallower format. It's 10 team. It's a shallower format, but I was streaming Alex Cobb for some of the starts he had. Like I think the Oakland start I started him against, and then somebody else where I think he had like 10 Ks or something. But yeah, Alex Cobb is like, we know what he is, right? Like he's a guy that you're going to play the matchups with. I don't think he's anybody that you can count on to, I mean, maybe towards the back end of your rotation, I guess, because he does give you some K upside, and the Giants are obviously a pretty good team. But Alex Cobb is never going to be a frontline ace or even a middle of rotation guy, in my opinion, but he can be useful in fantasy in the right spots. Jamie says, what's one thing you took away from the season? One guy that busted for you or happy with? That's a good question, Jamie. A little bit change of pace there. The one thing I took away from this season, and we'll talk about it at a later date as well, but the rookies this season, it's been really, really fun, but also at the same time too, with how the new collective bargaining agreement with rookies is and them getting incentivized to call these guys up sooner, it's important to remember that these guys are human too. And we talked about it again on Friday's show, and I'm going to keep hammering it again, is no rookie is susceptible to the slump. Guys like Julio Rodriguez, Juan Soto, Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, those guys are generational talents. Those are anomalies. They're not the norm. So even though we've seen guys like Ellie De La Cruz, Matt Mervis, we've seen Zach Geloff, we've seen Matt McClain. I mean, I could go on and on with all the rookies that we've seen this year trying to make an impact for their teams. I think I'm going to be a little bit more in terms of like doing my homework on the advanced analytics before I start adding some of these guys. If you guys remember going into draft season, when Anthony Volpe made the team and Jordan Walker, these guys were being drafted like in the middle rounds, like anywhere between 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds. And if we drafted today, those guys aren't even sniffing that. So in redraft formats, I mean, in Dynasty, there's strongholds, obviously, and, give them some time. But Brandon Pfaadt was another guy, right? Matt Mervis didn't do anything. Ellie's been struggling. I think his strikeout rate's over 30%. So to answer your question in short, Jamie, I think I'm going to be a little bit more in terms of doing my homework on prospects, but also being a little bit more patient as well. We saw guys like Gunnar Henderson have a really tough first half, but he's playing well in the second half now. So it's going to be tough. Next year, I'm going to be looking at rookies a little bit deeper now, and kind of seeing where we're at with that. But a guy that I've been happy with, we talked about it on last week's show with Tyler London, Backpick Fantasy, is Luis Robert. I know he had that sprained pinky and he hasn't been playing all week, but man, he's been so much fun to watch this year, and I think he's a guy that the White Sox are going to be looking to build around. Obviously, I've made my frustrations known with Trey Turner, even though he's played really, really well. But fantasy baseball, so much unlike fantasy football, is one of those sports where you can pivot and get guys off the waiver wire. All fantasy sports, I don't care what you play, baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever. All championships are won on the waiver wire, in my opinion. If you're one of those guys that sits back and just sit on players the entire time, doesn't make any moves all season, good luck. It's like catching lightning in a bottle. It ain't happening. You got to be able to make moves and pivot when guys don't produce, ride hot streaks, cut guys, know when to cut guys, et cetera, et cetera. So Jamie, to recap, I'm going to go into a little bit deeper dive on rookies next year and making sure that, one, I do my homework, but two, I remain patient. And then obviously the guy that busted for me was Trey Turner. I'm still in the thick of things. I'm right in the middle of the pack there, my home league, but drafting Trey Turner over Ronald Acuna stung, and I don't think it's something I'll ever forget in terms of fantasy baseball. So Chad says, I mean, Volpe has arguably delivered what we expected just without the average. Yeah, but I mean, if you got to remember too, and maybe it's because of the Jeter effect. I mean, he plays in the Bronx. I get it. He was killing spring training, and they had him batting leadoff, and now he's batting to the lower third of the lineup. So he's stealing bases. His average is obviously really bad. He's delivering some pop. I believe he homered today. But I wouldn't say that the production matched the expectation going into the season. So I know a lot of people were calling for Oswald Peraza to come back up and reclaim that role, but I'm so happy that, and I'm an O's fan, guys. I love just talking baseball. I'm so glad that the Yankees and the Orioles stuck with Gunnar Henderson and Anthony Volpe, because they know that that's the future of their rosters, the future of their positions, right? They're both going to be the starting shortstop. Maybe Gunnar switches over to third with Jackson coming up, but they know they're going to be the new faces of the franchise. They remain patient with him and said, we got confidence in you. Work it out. They don't need to be in the minors anymore. They've already proved that they can handle that. The test that they're going through the majors right now has been really fun to watch. Jamie says, I drafted Ellie with my last pick in a 20-man league. Should I be happy with yes? Should I be happy with yes? He has struggled. Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you got him in the last pick of your draft, kudos to you. If it's a dynasty format, great. Hopefully you can keep him there next year. But for the most part, Ellie's been pretty damn good. I'd say he's been the best prospect that we've seen thus far in the majors. Chad says, Hunter Brown's start announced as being skipped the day after dominant JP France outing. Could Brown end up the odd man out due to his youth and potential innings cap? You know what? It's so tough to say what these managers are thinking. I do think both are going to still hold value. Hunter Brown has been really, really good for them, especially earlier on in the season. I know recently he hasn't been great, but so is JP France. So maybe they kind of swap those guys out and just kind of do you start one day, you'll start the next, et cetera, et cetera. The Astros, with the addition of Verlander or Urquidy, came back and pitched pretty well today. Who knows what they do with that rotation? But if I was Dusty Baker, I'm rolling out Hunter Brown over JP France. But that's just me. JP France is probably a really good long reliever too. So, how much longer to hold on to Jazz Chisholm and a 3 outfielder head-to-head points redraft on the pine at the moment, wasting space? Charles, I believe you said you were new to fantasy baseball. You're not dropping Chaz Chisholm. He's a 5x5 stud. And something we've talked about before too on recent podcasts with fantasy baseball, and I'm talking to everybody here, is no matter who you have on your team, you could be talking about Juan Soto, Fernando Tatis, Jazz Chisholm, Ellie De La Cruz. Doesn't matter where we are in this paradigm of studs or middle of the pack guys or towards the end of your bench. Nobody is susceptible to slumps. Look at Trey Turner. He's been in a season-long slump. You're not dropping him. Same thing with Jazz Chisholm, right? Like, these guys have the potential. Their ceilings are so high in terms of what they can deliver for you. Charles, Jazz is probably just working through some shaking off the rust. Who knows if he's probably still hurt, has some lingering effects. Maybe they rushed him back because they're trying to get some offense in that lineup and make the playoffs. But when he's right, he's right. And if you remember before he got hurt this last time, I think he had 3 straight games with a home run in Boston. So and he was stealing bases. He's all over the field. The guy's an absolute stud. I personally won't have any shares of him simply because of the fact that he's always hurt. I don't have any shares of him this year, and I probably won't next year as well. But the ceiling's too high, and you can't get that on the waiver wire right now unless you play in a really, really, really shallow format. Jazz Chisholm is a very strong hold for me. And I assume your trade deadline is probably passed, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's wasting space. What you're doing with him right now in terms of benching him is the right move until, again, he starts showing a little bit more production here, but maybe some better matchups are on the way as well. I haven't really dove into the Marlins upcoming schedule. All right. Keep asking your questions, guys. I love the live chat right now. If you have more questions, keep dropping them. The next guy I want to talk about, and I talked about him in last week's show with Tyler, is James Outman. Why is he not rostered in more leagues? Seriously, somebody answer me that. If you're in the live chat right now, I would love to know, why isn't James Outman owned in more leagues? He's 63% rostered in Yahoo leagues right now. So he had a 2-run home run yesterday. Over the last month, he's hitting the last month. We're talking over the last 30 days. That's a large sample size. Okay. 333 average, 16 runs scored, 3 home runs, 11 RBIs, and 5 stolen bases. That's a 5-category stud that is sitting on your waiver wire right now. And he plays for one of the best teams in baseball. That's crazy. And you know what's even crazier? He's doing this from the 6, 7, 8 spot in the lineup. That tells you how good the Dodgers lineup is. And what they think of James Outman, because they let Bellinger walk in free agency this year to get this guy in the lineup. So he does sit every now and then against some lefties, but he's been so hot. I think Dave Roberts knows that, hey, this guy needs to be in the lineup most days of the week. He gets 3 games versus Milwaukee next week and then 3 games versus Miami. So a 6-game schedule coming up. If James Outman is on your waiver wire, he needs to be owned as well. And I know I talked about all these guys being like must roster, must own kind of guy. Here's how I would rank the guys that I have thus far, my top 3. First is Gavin Williams. Second, Zach Geloff. Third, James Outman. You could probably make an argument swapping Geloff and Outman depending on what your positional need is in your on your team. But if you can find a way to get both Geloff and Outman on your team, do it. The Dodgers are clearly one of the best teams in baseball, and they continue to hit. So James Outman is going to benefit from that. So even the guys that hit in front of him or behind him. So once that lineup turns over, Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman are going to knock his butt in. So plenty of run potential in that lineup as well. So Jamie says, if you like, let's get together and talk some football. Yeah, man, I would love to. Govier and I are working on. Govier actually released his fantasy football rankings. If you guys haven't done that, check out Michael's Twitter, MJ Govier, or X, if you will. He released his fantasy football rankings on not on Discord. Sorry, I'm losing the name of it. Patreon. So it's free. You don't have to pay for it. Go on the Patreon and get his fantasy football rankings. I actually got done with quarterback, running back, and defense today. I got wide receiver and tight end tomorrow, so I should have those out tomorrow for you guys, for those of you guys who like fantasy football. Let's talk about the hitter matchups this week. Easiest hitter matchups on the deck. First one, the easiest hitter matchup is the Chicago White Sox, followed by the Chicago Cubs, Philadelphia Phillies, New York Mets, and the Seattle Mariners. Those are the 5 easiest hitter schedules on deck for next week. The hardest hitter matchups, the Angels, the Marlins, the Rangers, the Brewers, and the Braves. Obviously, you're not sitting anybody on Atlanta. They're matchup proof, but they do have a rough slate ahead. So those are the hitter matchups. Chad says easiest hitter matchup is Matt Olson versus MLB. The dude is out in an absolute tear. We talked about it too. Like in one of my leagues, one of my buddies gave me a hard time for passing on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because he took him right after me. I can't remember who I took, but I waited and got Matt Olson like a couple rounds later. And man, has he panned out. So I love Matt Olson, man. He's absolutely killing it. That whole lineup is so much fun to watch. They're going to be really, really tough to beat in the playoffs. All right. So the 2 starting pitching streams that I like for this week. Number 1, Miles Michaelis for the St. Louis Cardinals. He draws the starts versus Oakland and versus the Mets. Neither of those lineups scare me. Michaelis has been pitching pretty well. He's kind of like Jekyll and Hyde. Sometimes he pitches well and sometimes he doesn't. And mind you, and I forgot to mention this, These are guys that are less than 60% owned in Yahoo leagues. So anybody over that, they're probably already rostered. So Miles Michaelis, it could be available in your league. Go get him. He gets the Athletics at home and then the Mets at home. Second, Nick Pivetta at Washington and at the Yankees. Third, Graham Ashcraft versus Cleveland versus Toronto. We talked about him on Friday's show. I think he's got like 6 to 8 starts with like less than 2 runs or something like that. Guy's been on fire. I know that he left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths because he was getting shelled in the first half, and a lot of people dropped him. But he's been rolling right now, and I think he's somebody you need to pick up. Cleveland's offense is not very good, and a Bo Bichette-less Toronto Blue Jays team doesn't really scare me either. So Graham Ashcraft can be useful, and he should probably be owned should be owned past this week as well. Fourth on my list is Bobby Miller versus the Brewers and versus the Marlins. And then fifth, and this is just really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, Kyle Hendricks versus the White Sox and versus the Royals. So I'm playing the matchups there. So those are the 5 guys that I would add for a 2-start pitcher stream next week. If you have the roster flexibility to kind of stream pitchers, maybe do a mix and match of all of those guys. We talked about him on Friday's show as well, but some closers to possibly look at for next week. Gregory Santos of the Chicago White Sox, noting that, again, the White Sox are not a very good team, but he is the closer for that team with Liam Hendricks on the shelf for the rest of the season and probably half of next. Guy's got electric stuff. If you need closer, go get Gregory Santos. He can give you some saves. We've seen guys get 30 saves on bad teams. Shit, Gregory Soto did that for the Tigers last year. Close to it, I think. So he's a guy that you can go get. And the other guy that I like as a SPARP, a guy who qualifies at SP and RP in most formats, is Carlos Hernandez of the Kansas City Royals. Go get him. He's got, again, triple-digit stuff. I know he gave up that grand slam, I believe, earlier in the week to Pablo. Can't remember his last name. Drawing me. Sorry. Second baseman for the Red Sox. So gave up a grand slam. They walked it off. But the guy's got electric stuff. He's the closer on that team as well. You can roll him in the SP position there. So go grab Santos and go grab Hernandez if you need saves. Chad says, Grayson is my number 1 for the week. Nothing is easier than a Padres team that doesn't want to succeed and an A's team that can. Yeah, I mean, here's my thing. I think Grayson Rodriguez is probably owned and probably more than 60%. So that's probably why I didn't make my list, but I agree with you. The matchups obviously are great. I don't love the Padres matchup, so I'm a little scared of that one. Just speaking as an O's fan, he's got to do a better job of limiting hard contact and walking guys. So he hasn't been striking out a whole lot of people, but he's looked good since coming back up. I'm really happy about Grayson Rodriguez, just from a pure baseball standpoint, because again, I'm an O's fan, but I like the call there, Chet. I'm off Hernandez. He struggled again versus after the Reyes, Pablo Reyes. That was his name. Thank you. Pablo Reyes grand slam. Yeah, I mean, again, he's going to be working through some stuff as well. But again, if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel here and you're looking for a closer, he's available. I think, again, I'm not saying that he's going to be a guy that I was a little less on him than most people were once Scott Barlow got traded. But again, the only reason why I like him is because, well, I like him for multiple reasons. He's got triple-digit stuff. But I like that you can throw him in your SP spot. So that's cool. I always like doing that. So that's probably a little bit of reason why I bump him up a little bit higher than when I say higher, he's probably, again, bottom 5 closer in baseball right now. But again, saves and closers are like running backs in football. They're out there. You can grab them. Again, if he sucks, you can cut him. So I just worry he loses his job. Maybe. I think they want to get a really, really deep dive into him and take a look and see what he's got. I think for right now, his job is pretty safe. Not especially after that chance against Boston where he gave up the grand slam. Yes, not great, but at the same time too, they want to see what they got in him for next year and say, hey, do we need to add a closer, or is he our guy going into next? So yeah. Another guy I want to talk about in terms of closers, and while he doesn't necessarily have the job right now, is Aroldis Chapman. So if you are in a league that plays in K per 9 or just strikeouts in general, Aroldis Chapman, outside of one start that he had versus the Astros, or save chance that he had against the Astros, the guy's been on fire, and he gets you 2 to 3 2 to 3 Ks every time he goes out there with not a lot of hits. So, and you can add him in deeper formats. I believe he's in the 60s in terms of percent per roster percentage. So Aroldis Chapman for me is a guy that's out there and also has the potential to claim that role. They love Will Smith there, and I think he obviously still holds that. But who knows? Maybe he has a meltdown. And if that happens or he gets injured, if that happens, Aroldis Chapman is an easy top 10 closer the rest of the way. So, but he does offer value right now being the fireman in that 8th inning role where he's getting you 2 to 3 Ks every time he goes out there. So go get Aroldis Chapman if you're looking for Ks and you want your ratios to look good. So Jamie says, here's one more huge question. Do we hold McKenzie until he comes back or drop him? Thoughts? I hate to drop him. Are you talking about Tristan McKenzie of the Cleveland Guardians? If so, then yeah, he's a drop for me. If you are playing in a 20-man league, I don't know if you're going to be able to find something on the waiver wire that's going to be equal to his value. Tristan McKenzie is a pretty damn good starting pitcher. I just don't think that they're going to let him throw again. If they do, it'll probably be towards the latter end of September there. It's a tough call. I actually, to be 100% candid too, last I checked, they weren't planning on him throwing again this season. So if that's changed and he's going to be making it back sometime during the fantasy playoffs, I'm probably still dropping him either way. Even if he does come back, I just don't see where they let him go really, really long in games. Maybe they use him as an opener or a long relief guy. I think he's a safe drop. Especially if he's clogging an IL spot for you, or you need the starting pitcher spot if he's not on one of your IL spots there. So yeah, I'm fine with cutting Tristan McKenzie. Even if he does come back, I don't think he's the type of pitcher that's going to be going out there and shoving it and giving you 10, 12K outings. I think he's a middle of the road guy. So yeah, fine with cutting him. Jamie says, I hate K per 9. I'm in one of those leagues. Eek, LOL. I actually like Ks per 9. I think it's a cool stat. It's something different. Noting that most of my leagues don't play that category, it's still pretty cool. It's just something different. I assume when we're talking K per 9, this is a head-to-head categories league, Jamie. But I actually like different stats and stuff like that. I think it's cool. Diversify, folks. Play in different formats, play in different categories, play in different AL, NL only leagues, mixed formats, dynasty, redraft, that whole 9 yards. Get exposed to all of it, especially if you're new to fantasy baseball. Obviously, we all gravitate towards the format of our liking. I'm a big head-to-head categories guy. I think I always will be. That's my preferred format. But I've played in points leagues before. I've played in AL and NL only, which, by the way, I hate. I just don't understand why would you want to cut off half a league. Whatever. It's fun. And then, auction, you talk about fab, you talk about waivers, no waivers, whatever it is. Get exposed to different stuff, see what you like, and makes the game more fun. Play in multiple leagues. Fantasy baseball for me is just so much unlike fantasy football. I actually prefer it more to fantasy football, but I'm getting excited for football content as well. Coming up here soon, both college and NFL. But so just to recap, I'm going to go over everything that we talked about here in short. If you're just now joining us, my top 5 guys to add this week. Number 1, in no particular order here in terms of priority. Actually, you know what? I'll do that. I'll rank them in terms of priority. Number 1, Gavin Williams. Number 2, James Outman. Number 3, Zach Geloff. Number 4, MJ Melendez. And number 5, Brian Hayes. Those are my top 5 pitcher ad or waiver wire ads. The schedule this week, there are 6 teams that have 7 games: Arizona, Kansas City, the Mets, San Diego, Seattle, and St. Louis. And there are 6 teams that have 5 games: the Cubs, White Sox, Reds, Twins, Phillies, and Blue Jays. And then everybody else has 6 games. Friendliest hitter matchups: the White Sox, the Cubs, the Phillies, the Mets, the Mariners. The hardest hitter matchups: the Angels, Marlins, Rangers, Brewers, and Braves. My top 5 2-start pitcher streams: Miles Michaelis, Nick Pivetta, Graham Ashcraft, Bobby Miller, and Kyle Hendricks. Jamie, so I'm going to spend these last 10 minutes here answering y'all's questions. So ask away, drop them in the live chat. Let's see what we got going on here. I want to help you guys out. I know we don't have a whole lot of people in here, but ask away. Yeah, most of my leagues are cats head to head. I started with 10 by 10 right off the bat, and that is K per 9. Gotcha. Jamie says, Mike, join my college football league. GoVA is in it as well. Bring Britt with you. I'm going to be 100% honest with you, Jamie. I've never played college fantasy football. That's so kind of odd to me, but could be cool. I'm down to try it. What platform is it on? I didn't, to be 100% again honest, I just never knew they did college fantasy football. Did that change with paying players now? It would be cool. I follow college football a lot. People always ask me who my team is for college wise. I went to a small school here in Northern Virginia. For those of you guys who don't know, George Mason University. They made the Final Four, I want to say back in 2005. That's where I went to college at. So they did not have a football program. They did, but it was club. But when people ask me who my favorite college football team is, I always say the one that's making me the most money. So I like to bet college football. So more content on that coming up as well once we dive into the college football season. Fantrax does it. Okay, cool. Yeah. Send me the information, man. mkbfantasy@gmail.com or just hit me up on Discord. I'm happy to take a look at it. No promises. I'm going to be busy this year with fantasy football and college football betting content stuff. So plus, obviously, my own leagues that I'm in. So I will I'll let you know, but I'll take a look at it. Just send me the details. Jamie also says Yahoo used to do college football before they ditched it. Yeah, I don't know if a lot of people were interested in it. Maybe that's why they got rid of it, but who knows? I know the betting world is on fire now. Everybody has tail my picks, fade my picks, whatever. I will say that college football betting wise is a lot of fun for me. So I'm really looking forward to sharing my picks with that. We have a group chat with me and a couple other friends. I've had up and down years. But again, I'm really looking forward to diving into some of the research. I usually play the spreads and then the over-unders, but I'm going to get into more of the first half, second half stuff as well, and then some prop bets too. So Jamie says betting is huge. Yeah, I always tell my wife this. It's fun when you're winning, and it's not so much when you're not betting. If you have a gambling problem, make sure you seek help too. I know I got to throw that in there. I have a lot of friends and just colleagues and people I've known over the years that have lost their asses betting all sports, not just college football. But you got to know when to stop too, and know when to cash out and say, hey, enough's enough. And that's happened with me a couple times. It's actually really disappointing. A couple years ago, I had to cash out probably quarter of the way into the season because, again, I just having really bad luck. And I was like, hey, I'm just going to take my ball and go home. So you got to know when to do that stuff. All right. Last call. Any questions fantasy baseball related? Let's drop them in the chat. If not, we'll jump off here a little early. I'll give you guys 8 minutes back at your time. I appreciate you guys jumping on today. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for all the questions. Make sure you join us again next week. We're going to do the half hour prospect, half hour, power hour, and then also the main show with myself and Britton. So if you are a content creator and you listen to this later, and you do fantasy baseball content and you know fantasy baseball, hit me up on Twitter or email me at mkbfantasy@gmail.com. And if you want to be a guest on the show next Sunday, I would love to have you. Talk about fantasy baseball stuff. I'll talk about some questions. I do think it's fun when you have two people doing this as opposed to just me rambling on the entire time. So I appreciate you all joining. Thanks so much. And we will see you guys next week. I'm Mike Virginia, Palazzo Podcast. Follow me on Twitter, MKB Fantasy. Follow Michael Govier, MJ Govier. Follow Britton Allen, @Britton Allen. Big Gentle Ben, the whole crew. Make sure you guys are following us. And please, for the love of God, steal your parents, your girlfriend, your husband, your aunts, your uncles, your grandkids, whoever. Steal their phones, make a YouTube account, and subscribe to the Palazzo Podcast. Do it. Do it now. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining. I appreciate it. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.